In 1227, Genghis Khan's passing marked the end of an era, leaving behind an empire of unprecedented scale. Yet, what many overlook is that within merely 40 years, this vast domain was embroiled in internal strife, crumbling entirely a century thereafter. How could such a formidable power disintegrate from within? More significantly, could the Mongol Empire have endured longer had its successors charted a different course? Before we delve into this, please indicate your viewing location and the current time by leaving a comment. I'm genuinely curious. Today, we're exploring a seldom discussed chapter of history, the Mongol Empire post-Genghis Khan. It's a narrative woven with ambition, dominance, decisions, and unforeseen repercussions. To grasp the empire's eventual fragmentation, we must first comprehend Genghis Khan's legacy. Upon his death in 1227, he apportioned authority among his four principal sons, Yoshi, Chagatai, Ogadai, and Tui. This wasn't merely the division of an inheritance, but the partitioning of an empire stretching from the Pacific to Eastern Europe. Yoshi inherited the western regions, which would later form the Golden Horde in Russia. Chagatai received Central Asia. Ogadai, the third son, was designated the Great Khan and direct successor. Tui retained the Mongol heartland. This arrangement might seem logical, but it planted the initial seeds of discord. Genghis Khan had failed to establish a clear system of succession, relying instead on personal allegiance. This loyalty was to an individual, not to a nation or the concept of the Mongol Empire. When that individual perished, so did the loyalty. Ogadai Khan assumed power in 1229, 2 years after his father's demise. His selection was unconventional. Unlike his siblings, Ogadai wasn't renowned for his martial prowess, a fact he acknowledged, which paradoxically became his strength. Ogadai possessed a rare humility for someone wielding absolute authority. He was adept at heeding his generals and leveraging others' talents. Pragmatic, he prioritized outcomes over methods. Under Ogadai, the Mongol Empire continued its expansion. He finalized the subjugation of the Jin dynasty in China in 1234, launched campaigns in Western Asia, and notably, invaded Europe. From 1237 to 1241, Mongol forces led by Batu Khan swept through Russia, Poland, and Hungary. Cities fell relentlessly, and European armies, including the Knights Templar, were decisively defeated. In April 1241, at the Battle of the Saju River in Hungary, the Mongols decimated the Hungarian military, leaving the path to Vienna and the rest of Europe open. Then, they abruptly halted. The reason? Ogadai Khan's death in December 1241, following a night of heavy drinking, an inglorious end for the leader of the world's greatest empire. According to Mongol custom, all princes had to return for the Kurultai, the council, to elect a successor. Batu Khan and the Western army withdrew from Europe, never to return. European history was irrevocably altered by a single bottle of wine. This serves as our initial reminder. Even minor personal choices can reshape the course of history. However, Ogadai's death isn't the most intriguing aspect, it's what transpired afterward. For the subsequent 5 years, from 1241 to 1246, the Mongol Empire functioned without a great Khan. Instead, it was governed by Turyana Khatun, Ogadai's widow. Turyana was a cunning and ambitious woman who spent 5 years forging alliances, eliminating rivals, and ensuring her son Guk would become the next great Khan. She succeeded, and Gayek ascended to the throne in 1246. However, Guk and Batu Khan, the commander of the European campaign, harbored intense mutual animosity. Both were grandsons of Genghis Khan, and each believed they had a greater claim to power. In 1248, Guk marched his army to confront Batu but died en route, his cause of death uncertain, possibly illness or poison. Once again, the empire found itself without a leader. This time, Batu Khan, powerful enough to claim the title of Great Khan himself, chose not to. Perhaps he was too distant from Karakoram, the imperial capital, or perhaps he wished to retain his newly conquered territories in Russia. Instead, he endorsed Mongol, another grandson of Genghis Khan from Tui's lineage. Mongol assumed power in 1251 and undertook an action unprecedented by his predecessors. He purged his adversaries. Mongol orchestrated a brutal cleansing, executing members of the Ogadai and Chagatai families who had conspired against him. This marked the first instance in Mongol Empire history where royal blood was shed for political motives. A fundamental line had been crossed, making subsequent transgressions easier. Mongol proved to be a capable ruler. He managed expenditures, conducted a census, and protected civilians, earning him the people's affection. Under Mongol, the empire continued its expansion. His brother, Hulagu, was dispatched to conquer Western Asia. In 1258, Hulagu captured Baghdad, bringing an end to the 500-year-old Abbasid Caliphate. The renowned House of Wisdom in Baghdad, an unparalleled center of knowledge globally, met its destruction. Stories claim the Tigris River turned black with the ink from countless books cast into its waters. Simultaneously, Mongol's sibling, Kublai, was tasked with finalizing the annexation of China. Everything appeared to be progressing smoothly. The Mongol Empire had reached its pinnacle. Then, in 1259, Mongol Khan perished during the siege of Dayu Castle in China. This occurrence had far more severe ramifications because Mongol had not named an heir. Two of his brothers, Kublai and Erik Buka, both asserted their claim to be the Great Khan, and this time, neither was prepared to yield. The Talaweed civil conflict, spanning from 1260 to 1264, marked a pivotal moment in the history of the Mongol Empire. This was more than a mere struggle between brothers. It represented a clash between two differing visions for the empire's future. Erik Buka championed the traditionalist viewpoint, choosing to remain in Karakoram, the ancestral Mongol capital. He believed the empire's core should be situated on the steppes, where Mongols, as nomads, adhered to their forebears' customs. Kublai, on the other hand, was in China. He recognized that governing a settled empire necessitated adapting to that settled civilization. He hired Chinese officials, learned Chinese writing, and respected Chinese traditions. This was not merely a conflict between two individuals, but a battle between two philosophies. Should the Mongols preserve their nomadic identity, or should they adjust to govern the peoples they had subdued? Erik Buka initially held the upper hand, controlling the capital. He convened a Kurultai and was declared Great Khan. However, Kublai possessed something more crucial: resources. Kublai commanded northern China, one of the world's richest regions. He commanded a larger army, comprising not only Mongol cavalry, but also Khitan and Gurchan warriors, who fought in a similar style to the Mongols, and tens of thousands of Han Chinese infantry. Kublai employed economic warfare, blockading Mongolia and cutting off food supplies. Famine subsequently struck Karakoram. In 1261, Erik Buka was forced into battle, suffering a defeat at Shimultai and retreating. 10 days later, he attempted another engagement near the Khingan Mountains, which ended in a stalemate. However, wars are not solely determined by battles. Logistics play a crucial role. Erik Buka depended on the Yanis River Valley to provision his army, but this proved insufficient against an opponent controlling all the resources of northern China. In 1264, Erik Buka surrendered, and Kublai imprisoned him. 2 years later, in 1266, Erik Buka died under mysterious circumstances in captivity. Many suspected Kublai had poisoned his own brother. The truth may never be known, but what is certain is that Kublai won the war but sacrificed the empire's unity. Kublai's victory came at a significant cost. The three Western Khanates, the Golden Horde in Russia, the Chagatai Khanate in Central Asia, and the Ilkhanate in Persia, did not acknowledge Kublai as the Great Khan. They maintained diplomatic ties and sent envoys, but essentially they operated as independent entities. Worse still, the Khanates began to wage war among themselves. Burki Khan of the Golden Horde, a devout Muslim, was enraged when Hulagu, the ruler of the Ilkhanate in Persia, massacred Muslims in Baghdad. In 1262, conflict erupted between the Golden Horde and the Ilkhanate, pitting Mongols against Mongols. Berke even formed an alliance with the Mamluk Sultanate of Egypt, enemies of the entire Mongol Empire, to fight against Hulagu. This marked an exceptionally significant historical juncture, as for the first time, religious and regional allegiances superseded loyalty to the Genghis family. Meanwhile, Kublai contended with Kaidu, a grandson of Ögedei Khan. Kaidu controlled a portion of the Chagatai Khanate and consistently challenged Kublai's authority. The war between Kublai and Kaidu persisted for decades, from the 1260s until Kaidu's demise in 1301, depleting resources on both sides. In 1304, a peace treaty was signed among the Khanates, nominally acknowledging the Yuan dynasty's supremacy, but this was merely a formality. In actuality, the unified Mongol Empire had ceased to exist. The four Khanates functioned as independent states, each pursuing its own agenda. Kublai Khan was not an unsuccessful successor. In fact, he was among the most gifted leaders of the Mongol Empire. In 1271, Kublai formally established the Yuan dynasty, marking the first time in Chinese history that a dynasty founded by foreigners governed all of China. By 1279, he had completed the conquest of the southern Song dynasty, bringing all of China under Mongol dominion. Kublai was a practical ruler. He employed Chinese officials while retaining Mongols in key positions. He respected Chinese culture but prevented the complete assimilation of the Mongols. He established two capitals, Chengdu, Xanadu, in the north, where Mongols could maintain their steppe lifestyle, and Dadu, present-day Beijing, in China. He championed trade, and under Kublai, the Silk Road flourished. Marco Polo, the renowned Italian merchant, journeyed to China during this era and resided at Kublai's court for many years. However, Kublai also committed costly errors. My attempts to conquer Japan in 1274 and 1281 both met with catastrophic failure, with thousands of my warships obliterated by typhoons, which the Japanese termed, quote, zero, divine wind. I also dispatched expeditions to Vietnam and Java, both of which were unsuccessful. These military endeavors were not merely a financial drain. They severely eroded my reputation as an invincible warrior, a cornerstone of Mongol prestige. Upon my death in 1294, I left behind an empire in decline. My successors proved considerably weaker. Over a mere 74 years, from 1294 to 1368, the Yuan dynasty saw 11 emperors, each reigning for less than 7 years on average. Between 1308 and 1333, there were 8 emperors, 2 were assassinated, and all perished prematurely. The reason for this instability was the absence of a defined succession protocol. Each time an emperor passed away, rival factions vied to install their chosen candidate on the throne. This weakened central authority, allowing power to devolve to local warlords who prioritized their own enrichment over service to the empire. Compounding these issues, the Han Chinese never fully accepted the Yuan dynasty. The Mongols maintained a distinct separation, unwilling to assimilate into Chinese culture. Mongol women, for instance, did not bind their feet, a practice that had become a symbol of upper-class status in China. We adhered to our own attire, cuisine, and celebrations. This created a profound societal rift. While Mongols constituted the privileged, tax-exempt ruling class, we were a minority, and the Han Chinese majority deeply resented us. Starting in the late 1340s, a barrage of natural disasters struck. Droughts, floods, and famines. My government proved incapable of formulating effective responses. In 1351, the Red Turban Rebellion ignited, initially a peasant uprising that quickly escalated into a national revolt. The final Yuan emperor, Togon Tamur, was a feckless ruler largely detached from politics, dedicating his time to esoteric Tibetan Buddhist rites and debauchery. In 1368, as Ming forces approached Beijing, Togon Tamur made no effort to defend the capital. He simply fled. He retreated north to Chengdu, then to Karakoram. 2 years later, he died in Yingchong, Inner Mongolia. The Mongol Empire in China had met its demise. While the Yuan dynasty collapsed in China, the other khanates fared no better. The Ilkhanate in Persia was the first to fall in 1335, following the death of Abu Sa'id Bahadur, with no clear heir. The Khanate fractured into numerous smaller states. The Chagatai Khanate in Central Asia also disintegrated, plagued by incessant factional strife. The Golden Horde in Russia endured the longest, until the 15th century, but it too gradually weakened and splintered into smaller khanates. In 1552, Ivan the Terrible of Russia vanquished the last Mongol Khans at Kazan and Astrakhan, signaling the end of Mongol suzerainty in Europe. As for the Mongols in Mongolia, they reverted to a nomadic existence, scattering into tribes that constantly battled each other. Karakorum, the magnificent capital founded by Genghis Khan, was razed by Chinese forces in 1388. The unified Mongol Empire, the largest contiguous empire in recorded history, had ceased to exist. However, the narrative does not conclude with collapse. Despite the relatively brief lifespan of the Mongol Empire, approximately 150 years from Genghis Khan to its complete fragmentation, its enduring legacy is undeniable. Economically, the Mongols established the most prosperous Silk Road in history. They devised the Yam system, a network of relay stations that facilitated rapid communication across vast distances. They safeguarded merchants, reduced tariffs, and standardized weights and measures. Concepts such as bills of exchange, deposit banking, and insurance traveled from Asia to Europe during this era. Culturally, under the quote "one or Mongol peace," culture and knowledge flowed unimpeded across Eurasia. Islamic advancements in mathematics and astronomy reached Europe. Papermaking and printing techniques from China diffused westward. Marco Polo, Ibn Battuta, and numerous other explorers could traverse Asia securely, an unimaginable feat before the Mongol era. Administratively, many Mongol systems were adopted by subsequent dynasties. China's Ming dynasty adopted aspects of the Mongol garrison system, and early Russian czars incorporated Mongol administrative and military methods. Yet there were also darker repercussions. The Black Death, the plague that eradicated a third of Europe's population, is widely believed to have spread along the Silk Road. Tens of millions perished during the Mongol conquests. Cities like Baghdad and Samarkand were devastated, and libraries and cultural monuments were destroyed. History is seldom black and white. It's a spectrum of gray. So, what pertinent lessons can be gleaned from the saga of the Mongol Empire post-Genghis Khan? Firstly, a lack of systemic infrastructure inevitably leads to unsustainable succession. Genghis Khan built an empire anchored in personal allegiance to himself. Upon his demise, no system existed to preserve unity. His successors were perpetually compelled to re-establish that loyalty through conflict. Modern successful organizations grasp this principle. They cultivate systems, cultures, and values that function independently of any single individual. A second key insight is the necessity of cohesion amidst variety. The Mongol Empire encompassed a multitude of cultures, faiths, and customs, which contributed to both its might and its vulnerabilities. When the overarching objective, such as territorial expansion, vanished, these distinctions fractured the unity. Muslims within the Golden Horde found it intolerable to witness the slaughter of fellow Muslims in Baghdad. Conversely, traditional Mongols struggled to accept Kubla's increasingly Chinese ways. The underlying principle here is that while diversity is beneficial, strong core values are essential for binding it together. The third lesson is about embracing change or facing decline. Kublai Khan understood that effective governance in China required him to assimilate into Chinese culture, yet he also sought to preserve a distinct Mongol identity. This proved to be a delicate balancing act, and ultimately, the Yuan dynasty failed in this endeavor. They were neither sufficiently Chinese to gain acceptance from the Han population, nor traditional enough for many Mongols. This dilemma mirrors challenges faced by global corporations today. How to localize operations while maintaining a consistent global brand. It's a question the Mongols grappled with over 7 centuries ago. Fourth, power does not linger. Each time a great Khan passed away, there followed an interregnum, sometimes spanning years, before a successor was chosen. This power vacuum allowed various factions to consolidate influence, forge alliances, and ready themselves for the ensuing struggle. The takeaway here is that leadership ambiguity within any organization inevitably breeds disorder. A clearly defined succession plan is crucial. Fifth, winning a conflict doesn't guarantee enduring peace. Kublai's triumph in the civil war against Erik Bokeh came at a significant cost: the permanent fragmentation of the empire. The Western Khans never truly acknowledged Kublai's authority. Sometimes, the manner of victory holds more importance than the victory itself. Now, let's revisit our initial query. Could the Mongol Empire have endured longer had its successors made different decisions? A plausible answer is yes. This might have been the case if Genghis Khan had established an unambiguous succession protocol, rather than relying on the Kurultai, where power often gravitated toward the most formidable, not necessarily the most capable. Similarly, if Ögedei had consumed less alcohol and lived longer to complete the European conquest and fortify governmental structures. Or if Munka had named his successor before his demise, thereby averting the civil strife between Kublai and Erik Bok. An extended empire might also have been possible if Kublai had managed to reconcile with the Western Khanates instead of allowing their complete autonomy. Furthermore, if the Yuan emperors following Kublai had demonstrated greater competence and a stronger interest in governance, the outcome might have differed. However, history deals not in hypotheticals, but only in what transpired. And what transpired was the disintegration of the Mongol Empire, the most expansive contiguous empire in history, for reasons common to many other great empires: a lack of clear succession, internal power struggles, an inability to adapt to new challenges, and a growing disconnect between the ruling elite and the populace. The narrative of the Mongol Empire post-Genghis Khan offers insights not just into the past, but also into our present and future. The difficulties the Mongols encountered, how to sustain unity within diversity, how to adapt without forfeiting identity, and how to execute smooth power transitions, remain challenges we face today in our personal lives, workplaces, and societies. History acts as a looking glass. It doesn't provide direct answers, but equips us with the pertinent questions. So reflect on your own life and organization. Are you constructing resilient systems, or are you solely reliant on individuals? Are you proactively preparing for changes in leadership, or are you allowing them to unfold chaotically? Are you embracing adaptation, or are you clinging to the status quo? These were the questions the Mongols confronted, and their responses profoundly shaped world history. If this video has offered you a fresh perspective on historical events, please consider hitting the like button and subscribing to help the channel produce more high-quality content. Share your thoughts in the comments below. What do you believe was the most crucial factor contributing to the Mongol Empire's decline? And do you think we are repeating similar errors in the contemporary world? Also, don't forget to answer the opening question. Where are you viewing from, and what time is it there right now? Please leave a comment. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.